Now, how would we create a push day as someone who benches 475 pounds and also just not only lifts for strength, but also muscle hypertrophy or size? Today's video, I'm going to break down how I do pretty much how I structure a push day. When going over a push day, there's obviously a few variables we want to look at. First of all, we got our muscle groups, right? So a push, we're going to train our chest, mainly our front delt, side delt, and then triceps, right? Triceps, 3 muscles. You got your side delt, front delt, your chest, which attaches to 3 different bone structures. We got your clavicular head, you got your sternal head, right, where the fibers run to the sternum and connect there. And then we also have our ribs. So then the pectoralis major also originates off your ribs. So we got ribs, sternum, clavicle, right? Clavicle. So then we know our front delt plays a role in, flexion of the shoulder, right? From there, obviously some abduction, and then obviously overhead pressing movements. So then triceps, simple as that. It's just elbow extension, anything within that realm. But then we have our long head of our tricep, which obviously does connect to our shoulder joint. So when we have that in more of an extended position within our shoulder, that can just stretch that head of the tricep a little more, cause a little more muscle growth, more stimulation there. So let's take that in consideration as well. Now, with that being said, we always want to structure our push days specifically what we are trying to overall achieve. So for me, for my personal goals, I structure my pull days or push days based on strength in the terms of I want to grow my bench, right? I always want to prioritize bench press because I want to get stronger on the bench press. And then I'll do more muscle hypertrophy movements or more things to stimulate muscle hypertrophy rather than strength in that sense. But I'm very more technical within the bench press portion because I do want to get a stronger bench press. I do like to do some powerlifting movements. So we got bench press. I always like to start off with bench press. So exercise 1 will be bench press. Now with this too, we're not fully fatiguing ourselves, right? Unless we're doing a max or something, but especially on these compound lifts, we don't want to take everything to failure. 1, because we're not going to grow from that strength-wise. We are not going to be able to recover enough time. We're not going to be able to recover enough in time for our next push day session or our next bench day, which I like to do around 48 hours after this push day. So we don't like to fully max bench. So how I would structure a push day, let's say that I'm not really focused on the whole powerlifting scheme of tapering or building up working RPEs necessarily. But I would structure a bench press. Let's say I want to do a top set of 3 reps, do a top set of 3, and then maybe 2 sets of 4 back down. And maybe that's an RPE of like a 7.5, okay? So that way we are stimulating enough intensity, a high enough intensity to we will see adaptations within strength because we're going to recruit more motor neurons because we are training in that higher or somewhat high intensity range, but it's not going to cause enough overall systemic fatigue or CNS fatigue because we aren't fully maxing out, having form breakdown, using literally everything that we have, and then creating all that buildup of CNS fatigue. So I would start with a bench press, right? Especially because that's going to be the most taxing movement, the heaviest movement. I want to get that out of the way first, clearly, right? I like to do most of my pushing stuff out of the way first because that, at least for me, causes the most CNS fatigue. It is the hardest, maybe mentally, but also physically for me. So I like to get my pushing movements or my harder, more taxing movements, more compound movements out of the way first. So we got bench press for our first workout. Now, second workout, this is when I'll either throw in an incline press, maybe some dumbbell incline, Smith machine incline, or I'll do some overhead shoulder press. Is that seated dumbbell? Is that seated machine press? Or is that a standing strict overhead press? For the purpose of the video, I'm not going to do standing strict overhead press or dumbbell seated overhead press because I want to do an incline second. But if I did want to get stronger with the overhead shoulder press, I would probably do one of those first. But for the purpose of the video, I'm going to do a machine press, which is going to be a little more easier because we're not relying on unilateral balance, core stability, or stability in general, because we're going to be using a machine press. So if I was going to do a free weight press, I would do that second. However, I'm going to do a machine press, so I'm going to save that for our third exercise. Our second exercise is going to be a dumbbell incline press. And we already did 3 sets of chest, right? Still at that RPE of 7.5, 7, but we don't want to do 3 sets of incline. We don't want to get redundant with our work. We want to get enough to create adaptation, create workload, mechanical tension. We do a heavy enough weight to cause mechanical tension, create mechanical tension, but we don't necessarily care about doing more than around 2 sets. If you're a beginner lifter, you can do more volume. My first couple of years lifting, I was doing 4 sets of everything and doing like 5 chest workouts a day, or for my push days. But if we're going to think about overall, not just working hard today, but building on time and time and time, and not doing redundant movements, having an efficient, good workout, we're going to stick to around 2 by 8. 2 by 8 on incline dumbbell press, right? Because if we want to have a push day, we want to make sure we're hitting that clavicular head. We want to grow that upper chest. So if we're doing some sort of dumbbell press, that incline, we remember not to arch our back too much, because then we're just doing a standard normal press pretty much if we're in that arched position. So we don't want to retract our scapula too much, but then we're just doing that incline press, kind of flaring those arms slightly to really just work those upper pec fibers. So dumbbell incline press, 2 sets of 8. Number 3, now we will include our shoulder press. So I'm going to go with just a machine seated overhead press. And right, we hit a little shoulder there. We could probably hit a little shoulder in our dumbbell incline press, front delt specifically. So for this, we're still going to stick around 2 reps or 2 sets of, I'm going to go 10 reps. The reason I'm doing 10 reps and not 8 reps, right, we're training it as a machine. It's going to be a little easier. We're going to be able to bang out some more reps. I prefer going a little more slow and controlled on shoulders just because I'm dealing with shoulder injuries right now, but we don't want to be just rushing through reps. A lot of injuries happen in that overhead pressing motion, so especially me, I want to be careful on that. But machine seated overhead press, 2 sets, 10 reps. Still going to hammer that front delt. We're still working in that volume range to make adaptations to our muscles to create the mechanical tension we need. And for the purpose of the video, I guess I'll do RPEs too. Or for bench, I'll do RPE. Everything else I'll do RIR, reps in reserve. So for dumbbell incline press, since this is mainly kind of like a beginning week, and if I was focused on power building, right, this is not going to be a heavy week in terms of bench necessarily. This might be a week 2, maybe even a week 1 in our block. So for the purpose of that too, I'm not going to take these to as failure as I would, right? Because all 3 of these movements kind of complement each other in a sense, right? But I don't want to max out these 2, especially because these do cause a lot of CNS fatigue buildup and systemic fatigue. So we just want to kind of keep an eye on how we're training that. We want to train smart. We don't want to train hard in everything. We want to train hard to a degree, right? But it's all about training smart, being technical, and evaluating all variables when we're trying to progress on weeks and weeks and weeks. So dumbbell incline back press, I'm going to do at 8. Dumbbell at means just RPE. So these are RPE. So this would also transfer to just 2 RIR. Machine seated overhead press, 2 sets of 10. I would probably do this as an 8 as well. So 2, you know what? Let's do this. RIR. We got 2 pressing chest movements out of the way. We got 1 overhead seated press out of the way. My shoulders grow quicker than everything else. I'm really blessed shoulder genetically wise compared to, let's say, my legs or my biceps, triceps, whatever the case may be, right? I'm just genetically gifted within my shoulders, meaning I don't have to do as much volume. I found out what works for me, and that's not a whole lot of volume. So on my push days, I will do only 2 sets of front delt specifically, that I'm hammering front delt, that I'm consciously saying this is a front delt exercise, compared to obviously I'm getting some front delt work and activation stimulus in bench press, in dumbbell incline press. But in terms of overall, okay, I'm doing this exercise specifically for front delt, I only do 1 of those, and that's the machine seated overhead press. If I was to do standing strict overhead press with a barbell, I would include that before the dumbbell incline. But for the purpose of this push day, I'm not going to do that. Some push days, yes, especially now that I'm trying to grow my bench and grow my overhead strict press, I will do barbell. But for the purpose of the video, we're not doing that. So we got machine seated overhead press out of the way. We got dumbbell incline press. We got bench press. This is usually when I only include 1 more chest variation exercise, and that's just going to be a seated fly. That's not going to cause too much systemic fatigue. It's a cable fly, right? We're not going to be able to create so much CNS buildup because it's just not one of those exercises that, 1, is a compound movement, but 2, is just overall taxing. Cable seated fly will be one of our last exercises that we do, especially because I like to get that little chest pump at the end. So this is now when I would like to get one of my tricep exercises out of the way, whether that's one of the more taxing ones specifically as the first one. So anything like a push down, a single arm push down, a a V-bar push down. One of those movements, a push down movement, specifically like what I like to do first, because I can overload it better. I can add more weight. It's easier to push down rather than doing an overhead extension, right? So I like to get my push down out of the way. We'll do exercise 4 is just a tricep cable single arm push down. Same thing, we like to do 2 sets. I'm gonna do 2 sets of 10 reps. Now the thing here too is I've never had my triceps never get sore. Like I can max out on any tricep thing, do 5 supersets of triceps if I wanted to. My triceps never get sore. So I like to take my triceps a little harder than I would any of these more compoundy lifts, right? So for tricep push down single arm, I'm gonna look for around an RPE 9, which would be about, let's say 0 to 1 RIR. So sometimes mainly I do like to max out triceps, go to failure, but we also like to stay maybe in that 1 RIR range. We don't want to break down form necessarily either. So around a 1 RIR, which is 1 rep left in reserve. So we're training at an RPE 9, 9.5, and 0 to 1, right? So standing tricep cable single arm push downs. You can use a D handle and push it down like that. I started using a cuff. I really like using a cuff. I don't have to worry about my grip giving out or working in my form. I can just lock everything in to my tricep for those tricep push downs, extending that elbow. So that's exercise 4. Now this is when I will start doing an overhead variety of tricep extension, whether that's anything within my shoulder being extended in that extended position or just out where I'm feeling that tension. So let's see, I usually like to do either a cross-body tricep extension like that where my arms are out to my side, or I like to do a seated straight bar extension, or just a standing rope cable extension like that. Purpose of the video, I'm going to do a seated overhead tricep extension cable with the straight bar. So seated overhead cable straight bar extension. And then same thing, I like to go a little higher on these. 2 sets of 12. 0 to 1 RIR. That says RIR, okay guys? But same thing for this. First of all, I'm dealing with a lot of shoulder pain right now. I'm trying to rehab my shoulders, so I'm not gonna load my triceps up so heavy in this position where I'm doing 5, 6 reps, right? I don't want to put that unnecessary stress and strain on my shoulders in this position, especially when I have pain in extension or in shoulder external rotation, things like that. I don't want to put myself in a position to cause more harm or aggravate my tendons anymore. So I like to go a little more volume, rep-wise, on any overhead extension. So we're going to do 2 sets of 12, right? We got 4 tricep exercises out of the way that are strictly for triceps. So we got 1 shoulder exercise out of the way, 2 triceps are done, 2 benches, our chest is pretty much almost done. But now let's finish shoulders off. So exercise 6, I like to do some sort of abduction, shoulder abduction, where we're pulling our arms out to our side, taking away from us. That's going to hit a lot of that mid delt, right? That mass of our shoulder kind of. So from that side angle, right? Obviously our front delt's huge, but from that side angle, the boulder shoulders, we want to hammer that side delt. How can we do this? We can do this by doing a seated dumbbell lateral raise, a machine standing lateral raise, either unilateral or bilateral. We can do a leaning cable lateral raise. We can do where we're leaning on a bench dumbbell lateral raise. You have many options. We just want to do something with shoulder abduction where we're lateral raising out to our side. I have a really dope machine at my gym that's a standing machine loaded side lat raise, which I do unilaterally, which is 1 arm at a time. So I'm going to throw that on. So we're going to say standing lat raise. Simple as that. Standing lat raise. I already have big delts, like I said. I don't need to do a whole lot of volume for them. They're not a muscle group that I struggle to grow. So I just do 2 sets as well. But I will push this 12 to 15 reps. So I'm going to say 2 sets of 12 to 15. Sometimes I'll do 8 reps. Sometimes I'll do 10. But for the purpose, like I said, for me, how I would structure a push day, I'm going to go a little more higher in volume for lat raises because, like I said, I'm dealing with 2 shoulder injuries, shoulder impingement, shoulder tendonitis. I'm not going to hammer away heavy-ass weight for 6 reps, putting so much strain and tension on that subacromial space where my tendons run through in that where my supraspinatus runs through, right? And then supraspinatus does what? It does shoulder abduction in that first 0 to 15 degrees, so right down here. I don't want to put unnecessary stress and strain on that tendon that's already chronically inflamed. So I'm going to go a little higher volume. Still do a rep range of 0 to 1 RIR. All right, so we're training a little higher volume for shoulder raises because I don't want to aggravate my tendons, but I still want to do enough intensity to stimulate kind of muscle growth, right? To cause adaptation, to create adaptation. So 0 to 1 RIR, 2 sets of 12 to 15. We're basically done, guys. We got two shoulder exercises out of the way. That's all we need to do. We got bench press, dumbbell incline. We got our triceps out of the way. We're going to finish this push day off with a seated cable fly. 2 sets of 10. 0 to 1 RIR. Cable seated flies don't cause as much systemic fatigue. Plus, I like to hammer some flies at the end to get that nice chest pump at the end. So we're finishing with seated cable flies, 2 sets of 10, 0 to 1 RIR. And that's the push day, guys. So we got 5 to 6 sets of bench. Sometimes I only do 1 set of seated cable fly, especially if these are my heavier weeks. If I'm week 3, week 4, my block, and I'm pushing an 8.5, 9, 9.5 single or a max, right? I'm going to take this a little lighter, maybe do 1 set because I already did hella work for my chest and created a lot of use a high intensity, right? So this is how I structure a push day, guys. We're hammering away at some compound movements. We're training bench and we're using an RPE scale so that way we can create and grow strength-wise week by week without creating too much fatigue during that one session, which hinders our progress and our lift for the weeks on and weeks after. So we did that. We got our front delt out of the way with machine seated overhead press. We got both tricep exercises out of the way. We don't need to be redundant with tricep exercises. All our tricep does, like we mentioned, is elbow extension, elbow extension, elbow extension, elbow extension. You know what I'm saying? So it's like hammer 3-4 sets. And if your triceps are stubborn, they don't grow, try to increase the frequency. Do 3 days where you're 3 days a week where you're recovering enough between sessions, but where you're hammering triceps, right? 4 to 5 sets, whatever. So 4 sets of triceps done. We got our standing lat raises to hit that middle delt, and then seated cable fly, 1 to 2 sets. But yeah, this is the intensity that you would kind of want to look at, right? We want to be close to failure or right around failure or at failure, especially with exercises that we can recover quickly from, like any of these, especially for me, right? I know this is pretty easy for me, but dumbbell incline press, we're still working with an 8 RPE. But yeah, guys, this is probably a longer video, and I was just talking, but here's how I would structure a push day. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. I got a website coming out. Hit my Instagram in the comments below for coaching, guys. If you want something like this tailored to you, but for your exact goals and based on you and not my stupid shoulder injuries. But that's all I got for you guys. And I'll see you in the next one.